to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with your host Dean Delisle as he interviews guests. News and commentary are provided by Jackson Delisle and Monica Hacker. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
Today's show is brought to you by Planable. Planable.io gives your social media team everything they need to really move their creative process forward. It allows you to preview social media posts as they are live, real time. No more screenshots, mock-ups, spreadsheets. Your clients can review content from within the platform. And do you have anything to say about it, Monica?
It's a great platform. We've been using it now for a month. I love it. It's a game changer in the content world. I highly suggest it.
Yeah, go to Planable, Planable.io to start your free trial today.
All right, this week's influencer guest is Alistair Wellesley. He is founder and CEO of Digital Times Transformation. It's an advisory and human capital management corporation providing board-level consultation in the cybersecurity, risk management, and digitalization space. He has a great passion for this topic and driving business solutions in an ever-evolving world. And if we've ever been in an ever-evolving world, it's been during this time that we're in right now. So without further ado, Alistair, welcome to the Influence Factory.
Dean, great to see you. I hope all's well with you and your family, loved ones, and your group employees as well. Everybody good?
Yes, absolutely. And you as well. And we're social distancing, right? So you're on the East Coast. I'm in the Midwest. So we're doing our job so far.
Yeah, you got it, man. That social distancing. I love that new word. You know, that's a phrase that's going to be around by the sound of things for quite some time, right?
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing is I've been a networker and collaborator for as long as I can remember. And, you know, it was always about connecting and getting people together. And now this new world that we're in is about staying connected while we're disconnected. So, you know, I think I have another book to work on here. So
I think you do. I think you just actually made up the title of it as well. So it's a good one. Send me a copy when it's done, right?
Yeah, you bet, man. You bet. So here's what's funny. So I spent a little part of my youth, as you know, we've told our stories back and forth for quite some time. My mom was in the UK. I lived there till I was about in third grade, and ran the streets of London. I always say, like Oliver Twist, I was a scrapper. I just remember running the streets and getting picked up by bobbies and shuffled home. They knew who we were, and it was just the life that I knew. I've grown up on the street. So when I met you and grown up in the UK, I had this same vision that I'm like, dang, I might have even seen him when I was running around on the streets. But
now I recognize you, Dean. Now it's coming back to me. There you go.
So I always just like to hear about, and our audience likes to hear about, you know, because we believe that, you know, in our youth is what weaves us to who we become, right? So the experiences that we have, the upbringing that we have, take us a little bit through just your upbringing and, you know, maybe the people that influenced you that, like me, needed a little guidance in the right direction at times, and just go for it, man. And we'll pick it up from there.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to cut me off because you know what I'm like when I get on the train here. But in terms of my upbringing, it was just a fantastic family upbringing. I was adopted as a young baby, and so at 6 weeks old actually. But for my sake, I was adopted by just the most amazing British family. Great mother, great father. Unfortunately, have both passed away now, and 3 sisters and a brother. And we were a very strong family unit, despite the fact that we had quite a varying age degree. between us all, something like, I think, probably about 16, 17 years from eldest to youngest. Yeah, exactly. We were and grew up as a tremendous family unit, and we still remain a tremendous family unit. So I think in terms of from my own personal background, I had the absolute privilege of being one of those children that sort of understood family and principles and values. My two parents, bless their cotton socks, were from that generation where it was all about, if you want something, get out there and do it. Don't expect to be given it. And we were taught that, we were taught the simple pleasures of life at a young age. I mean, it was, family holidays and camping and country walks with the dogs was sort of the entertainment. And I can remember from a diddly squat age of being, out the front door at the weekends from early in the morning with my friends, running around the village we lived in, playing various different games and whatever else. And the only time you had to be back was for lunch, and then you had to be back in the evening for dinner and bath, and then of course you wanted to go back out, and you were promptly put into bed.
Wasn't that the best though? Wasn't that the best? Wasn't that the best? You couldn't think about maybe that today.
Unbelievable.
Just to let your kids run loose.
Unbelievable, because it teaches you so many different things, and it's only when you get older you're able to look back on those lessons that at the time you don't realize they're lessons. They're just your life. Your life is climbing up and down trees. It's running around parks. It's playing, well, we call it football, you call it soccer, and anything else that we could get our hands on in terms of balls and such like. And you look back now, of course, and you realize it's teaching you an independence. It's teaching you that ability to be able to think for yourself. But you're not doing it, consciously. It's just happening. It's part of growing up. And of course, we always listen to, I remember listening to my parents complain about, our generation. I sit there and now complain about my children's generation. So there's always criticism being handed down. But it is a shame, Dean, that we've got, society's got itself into this bit of a pickle where that independence is being somewhat taken away, I think, from children because of a lot of things that go on out there. And, parents are not so comfortable letting their children run around and not know where they are for a few hours, et cetera, these days. And probably rightly so. I mean, there's some pretty bad stuff out there on the streets, as we well know. But it is a shame. And it is a shame those freedoms in some respects have been lost. Maybe the funny thing is with this complete lockdown that we've got at the moment, as much as all of us don't want it and we want to get out there and do things, as I said to, my kids who are here with me, I said to them, well, the funny thing is we've always been close as a family unit because of the way I was brought up. But maybe this gives other parents out there the opportunity of spending more time with their own children in these times because they've got no choice. They can't take them to sporting activities. They can't leave them with a babysitter or a nanny or somebody else while they go do their own thing. So hopefully there's been some benefits from that. But that was my early upbringing. I mean, I was, I think, school for me was one of those things where in my young days, thoroughly enjoyed it. In my sort of teens, not so much. But I think I hear that from everybody. But I made a very strange decision. It was a very sort of out of spontaneous decision. I persuaded my parents at the grand age of 16, believe it or not, Dean, to let me leave school. In the British schooling system, you have, in those days, you had something called O-levels. And I passed enough O-levels to carry on to A-levels, which would have finished my high school education. And that would have then, depending on the grades, allowed me to go on to university. And I was lined up for university just like all the family members have been lined up for university. But at 16, for a number of personal decisions, I decided I just wanted to get out and work. It was a very spontaneous decision, and I persuaded them to let me to leave school and join a bank. And this particular bank was called Coutts & Company, and Coutts & Company is quite famous because it's where the Queen banks. And so, yes, the Queen's banker. And so as a result of this sort of prestigious name, I was able to persuade my parents, this is what I want to do. Because I didn't want to do banking at all, but I just wanted to leave school. And I think at that time I had this notion that, well, I just want to get out there and work. I'd already started work. I was working at 12 years old. I mean, I was, whatever it was, whether it was delivering newspapers at 14, pretending I was 18 and working at a toy shop and serving people behind a counter and things like that. I'd always had this want to work. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed making money. And, I remember when I was younger playing football, I played rugby at school, big passionate rugby player. Played rugby at school, but played football when I was younger. And my mother didn't particularly like me playing football because I was mixing with the local villagers, and she wanted me to mix with the grammar school boys instead. And so anyway, so I said, well, I'm going to play. And she said, well, I'm not buying you a football boots. You'll have to buy your own. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to go and get a job and buy my own. So that's what, and that, I was brought up that way. And so it's like, okay, if you're not going to support me on that, I better go figure out a way I'm going to get this myself. And I went around every shop in our little market town and eventually got a Saturday morning job. And that gave me enough money to buy my football boots. And then I went off and played football. So sort of there wasn't a fear in me in terms of working. There was never that view of, oh my God, what am I going to do, this, that, and what else? I mean, I look back on it now and I wonder, because my idea was to study law at university and think to myself, well, I probably could have, had all of that in the legal world, and that would have been fun. But on the other side of the coin, I decided to just seize the initiative and go for it. So I left at 16. I joined Coutts and Company. I worked there for about a year. And then a family friend was in the real estate business and said to my parents, if Alistair ever wanted to come into real estate, I think he would do well in selling property. And I took up the offer. And for 5 years, I was working in real estate, very successful in selling. Won a lot of sales competitions. We would have these month-to-month competitions, etc. Not all of them, but enough to keep my head in the top percentage. And and then saw an opportunity to move to London and joined, in fact, joined a magazine where I was selling property advertising space. So I was selling advertising, but I was selling it to the real estate brokers.
Well, that was like in the Mad Men days too, right? That was real advertising. Yeah. That was generation one or two advertising.
Yeah, that was a crazy time. That was a crazy time, Dean. I mean, that was my introduction to business lunches, I think, because we used to get to the office at 9:30 in the morning. Nobody started before 9:30 in advertising, and then you were sort of expected to be out of the office by 12:30 because you were expected to be wining and dining somebody. And in those days, when I joined, I think there was something like an average of 20 pages a month in advertising, and within 12 months, I'd taken that average of 20 pages a month to 120 pages a month. Wow. And so we'd done pretty well with that, and that sort of introduced me to good wines and great dining food. I was living down in London as well. So that was quite an experience I was 21, 22. So very young in comparison. So, and then decided, another spontaneous decision, I'm going to go traveling. And I decided to stop what I was doing. I got a backpack and I bought a ticket and I left England with literally $100 in my pocket. And this is in 1988 or 87. And so, it wasn't a lot of money, obviously, even then. And got to America and hang out with a great girlfriend for a week or so, and then traveled on to Australia. And I stayed in Australia for 6 months and just literally backpacked, worked, made enough money to be able to go and spend a couple of months in Thailand and Bali on the way home. And then when I got back, I remember hiding from my parents because I had no money because I spent it all in Bali and Thailand. And I thought, I'm not going to tell them I'm home until I actually go and get a job because that's the first thing they're going to say, what the hell are you doing? I went into this recruitment company and got told by a friend of mine that they would help me get a sales job. So I thought, I don't even know what recruitment's all about. And went into this recruitment company, and within 4 hours, they'd offered me a job, and we negotiated terms over the next week. And I went into the merry industry of recruitment. And it was one of those, I thought, well, you know what? I need the job. I've got the salary. And if I really don't like it here, a recruitment company, I can probably find another job through them while I'm here. So I didn't think it's a bad idea. Yeah, right. But within 6 weeks, I just fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. And I thought, this is the industry. This is where I want to be. I didn't really like the company I was working for. And it was a very commoditized, like get them in, get them out, put an invoice on their back. It was bing, bang, bosh. Everything that's bad about the recruitment industry, in fairness. But it was a crazy time. If you think back to those late 80s, it was all about, Wall Street and making money and bullish markets and bear markets and all those type of things. So
that's where I was at, Merrill Lynch. So I started at Merrill Lynch, but I was on the tech side of Merrill Lynch. I wasn't in the money side. But what's interesting about the parallel here is I remember looking across the fence and seeing the recruiting, and I was getting hit up by recruiters because I was a hot commodity in the tech space, and I had my hands on Merrill Lynch, so I had that sort of blue blood, but I was anti corporate America because I didn't have a degree and things like that either. So I was sort of the rebel, but I was attracted by IBM and took all their courses and their sales training. And I was like, and they were always talking about the consulting, and the consultants were marching in, making all this money. And I go, I'm going to be a consultant. So then I left Merrill Lynch and I went talked to my IBM buddies and just became a consultant. But it was either recruiting or consulting seemed like the hot ticket,
I think you picked the right one with the consulting, because the recruitment marketplace is a great marketplace, but it's funny actually, because you have a lot of people from the outside think that it's quite an easy way of making money, but actually it's an extremely complex sales team, because if you think about it, it's a four-way sales process. I mean, first of all, you've got to sell yourself to a company that are going to use you to actually go source this person. You've got to sell the job to a candidate. You've got to sell yourself to the candidate. You've got to sell the candidate to the company, and the company to the candidate. So you've got a complex scenario, and you're dealing with an intangible, because you're dealing with a person on both sides. And unfortunately, people have minds and therefore can change their mind at the flick of a switch. Right. So it's funny seeing people who, I've been in it for 25 plus years, who've come in actually who say, oh my goodness, I would never realize this is so tough. And so you have to be very tenacious in it. The thing I didn't like is that, probably back in the 80s, the recruitment industry really, really exploded, didn't it? I mean, it sort of like became a service that everybody turned to. Companies were growing, et cetera, and they needed that. But the industry itself, I think it didn't do itself favors with shifting towards the contingency model and sort of almost having this sort of junior pack of wolves out there, not really looking at the person, not really looking or caring about what the person was going to do, just like, have I made a placement so I can get some commission? And so that, for me, meant that having started up a business in the early 90s with a couple of friends that I was working with, I did not want to stay in that side of the industry. And I wanted to stay in recruitment, but I didn't want to stay in contingent recruitment. So I took my sort of fast move sales skills that I got and shifted it into retained search. And in 1993, landed I can't mention the company name, but one of the very big tech firms, landed a really nice contract in the outsourcing space, and took that work on, and had a couple of guys working for me. And my company is called Morgan Howard, and we absolutely knocked that assignment out of the park. I mean, I can still remember the three people I placed in 1993. We took this contract on in October. We had them all signed up, literally all signed up and on board by February 1st. Wow. So within 4 months. And in those days, for that particular company, I was not selling a permanent job. I was actually selling a 2-year fixed-term contract, which had been bought in by this tech company in that particular country, simply because of the concern with where the markets were moving to, et cetera, et cetera. They, within 6 months of finishing this work, they converted everybody into full-time employees, and that 2-year fixed-term contract went out the window. So that was a tough sell, but it was a great opening, and we got a lot more work out of them. And that was the beginning of my company, which was grandiosely called Morgan Howard. And without boring you with every detail, I mean, Morgan Howard, I took from those early days in 93, that by 98, we were doing work across the UK and Europe, all in the tech sector, all retained search work. And then I was with one of my colleagues who had found some work in Europe. We were sat in Paris. We were out on a beautiful area of Paris in the 16th district. We were obviously working hard because we were drinking pasties and beers, as you do. And he suddenly came up with this bright idea. Why don't we open an office in Paris? And I thought, oh man, brilliant idea. So we went racing back home after we were finished that week over there doing that assignment. We were racing back home, told everybody we're opening an office in Paris. And that's what we did. It took us a year to get us open because I had to go and find a French a French national to run it, a great guy, sort of friend of mine today. And we brought Liliane on board in, I think it was beginning of 1998. And then, Dean, it was just like, oh my God, it's like the lights have gone on. All of a sudden I see this, hang on a second, we've got an opportunity to be a really, really smart boutique, retained only search company specializing in technology search work. So that could be for a tech company, that could be functional tech. And so I had, in the beginning of 1998, including Paris, I had 21 employees. By 2000, I'm going to say May, June of 2000, we'd gone from being about $1 million and a half business to being a $20 million business. And we had 10 offices globally, and we had 130 people working for us. Yeah, so that was I just had a blast, man. That's an absolute blast. What can I tell you? And out there, we got Europe, we got Paris, we got Spain, we got Italy, we got Amsterdam or Netherlands, we got Singapore going, we got Hong Kong going, we got Palo Alto going. I mean, we just had an absolute bust. But of course, we thought we were brilliant. The markets were really what was brilliant. Wasn't us,
right? Yeah, all of us were living off of that. That was awesome.
Yeah, because you had everything. I mean, you had just the perfect storm, the positive perfect storm. You had deregulation in telecommunications, right? You had year 2000. Everybody forgets this. Everybody thought the world was going to collapse and planes were going to drop out of the sky, and and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm not going to be flying that night anyway, so it doesn't matter as long as you're interested.
Funny story. You'll relate to this because you were replacing tech guys. I became a programmer, and I had about probably 50,000, 100 lines of code out there in the world, and Y2K came, and I go, well, it's not a big deal. We just need to put like 5 pieces of code, but people were paying like $50,000 for a piece of code. Just to feel better, I was like, okay, and I'm sure I didn't even charge enough, but it was just like crazy.
Oh, you could have literally charged anything. I mean, we would I remember walking into a couple of tech companies that were clients of ours. We were working big time with IBM then, and we were doing consulting work with McKinsey, believe it or not, and stuff like that. And we were extremely well thought of. But you'd walk into a meeting expecting to sit down, normal discussion and how can I help and where are you going to, what have you. And you literally would walk out with a contract, go find these 5 people like now, get them signed off, get me with the paperwork, we'll raise you your retainer invoice, please don't wait, we are desperate to hire. So it was a crazy time, but we thought we were brilliant, but I think the market was a bit. So now, listen, I mean, of course, all of that was just growth. And then we got hit with the .com drop back. So that was my real first experience at sort of the negative side of a business. I mean, I'd seen cutbacks before, but not being in control of the business, and not a business which was so personal to me and had just experienced nothing but success. So that was draining. And we had to close offices down, let people go. It was just horrible situation. But we came through it. We kept Morgan Howe alive, and I had been living in the US for a short while, moved back to Europe, and I remember calling my wife and saying, we're not going to stay here, love. We've got to move back to the US. It's where the tech market's going to come back first. Yeah. And so myself, and 2 little ones, literally got on the plane and moved over we chose Greenwich, Connecticut, which is not a bad place to choose, right. And set up shop there and kept the UK office going. And we had a guy working for us over in Asia. So we kept the global boutique perspective, even though it was a highly reduced perspective in terms of headcount. But when we spoke to our client base, and most of our clients said, we don't care. As long as you've got the coverage, that's what we like, but it's not about the numbers of people so much. And, I got back on the phone and started wheeling and dealing. And it took me 6 months to crack it in the US and get a new search. But once that happened, it was just like, off. And so then we ended up building a really nice business in the US market. We probably had about 10 or 12 people over there doing about $5 million of revenues or something in that region. So, we just went flying off, and that's what I've been doing ever since. The time I left Morgan Howe was in 2007-8 for a number of personal reasons, and I really just went into a lifestyle. Alistair on his own, just do some consulting work, do some advisory work, do some searches here and there.
I've got to ask you, how old were the kids when you decided to do that?
Well, unfortunately, that was part of the reason. The kids were actually still relatively young. Matilda was born in 99, Seb 2001, so what of that, 6 or 7, and actually, 8 or 9. But my wife and I gone through a divorce, and they were now separated from me. And, I told you about my upbringing earlier, about family and stuff like that. That was just heartbreaking. So I couldn't concentrate. I needed to be on my own. I needed to have that freedom and not worry about business so much, and took that opportunity. And funny enough, I think I would have stayed like that, Dean, if it hadn't been for the children finally coming to live with me, because I get on very well with my ex. And she loves the fact the kids have come to live and spend time with me. And it suddenly made me wake up in the morning and go, hang on a second, I can't have 2 kids around me with them just seeing sort of dad just waltzing down to his desk whenever he fancies it. I'm going to start work again. So that's why I went out into Digital Times transformation and started going about building that up so that they could see that, you can't just sit on your backside and coast life. You've got to get out there and work if you want to be something. Yeah. And that's where we are today. That's DTT today.
Yeah. And so that's awesome. And I think it's because you and I lived through, you said that was the worst time that you had ever experienced in business, the dot-com bubble, the burst. I had $100 million tech company going at that time, and it crashed and lost about 47 million personally in a short period of time. And we had to recover and shift and so it was an interesting time, but I do believe that time for all of us has helped us with this current time and situation that we're in with, COVID, right? And now all of a sudden we've got cybersecurity and COVID sort of mashing up together. And you and I had talked a lot when we first met about people don't take cybersecurity seriously. I don't care. It could be our Fortune 500, it could be mid-market, it could be small business. Until something happens to them or there's a case or something. And it's just crazy how people just turn a blind eye to that. And then all of a sudden something like this happens and opens up even more holes in our infrastructure. So maybe you can speak to your thought about that and what people should pay attention to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you bring up a couple of really good points. And DTT has pivoted from technology and digital transformation work heavily into cybersecurity. I mean, I've shared this with you. You've seen it on our website that we've just assembled this just incredible advisory group. And then we did that because as I started to see more opportunity and also requests within search work for cybersecurity professionals, be it CISO or be it people within service groups in selling cyber services, etc., I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel in myself at that time, I do now, but at that time, taking on that sort of work with my background would be proficient enough for the company. Could I really genuinely put somebody in front of them that, sounded great, looked great, but had all the skills? So I actually built this advisory group, and I was very fortunate. I probably got one of the top names in the cybersecurity industry, a guy called David Orksmith, who for 12 years headed up Microsoft. He was personally approached by Bill Gates, headed up Microsoft's national government's business. That's their cybersecurity business then. And he agreed to join my advisory group. And it was great because I would pick up this cyber work and I would have David as my sort of validator, my verifier. So I would pull my shortlist together and call him up and say, I got 5 or 6 on this shortlist. I want to present to the client. Do you think over the next 2 or 3 days you could filter them for me and tell me your opinion on their capabilities? And he would love doing that. And we would go back to the client and say, hey, look, don't take my word for it. It's also been backed out. So this was a very different service offering to the client than you would tend to get from the standard search firm. But when you look at the cyber marketplace and you start to see it and you learn it, and since then we've gone from David to 28 others, and still growing that advisory group and doing now more than just search work. We do interim, we do consulting, assessment work, strategic planning, and we've had some big names work with us. One of the biggest pharma companies in the world actually just used DTT to do some of their financial investment.
And I told you when we met, when I looked at that network that you have just off that advisory group, I said that's a global advisory group that can literally literally help any size organization through just about anything. And now you guys are seeing the demand in this. But what do decision makers at these companies really need to pay attention to in this time? Because right now, I think people are scrambling, right? They're scrambling they're reacting, but they also need to start thinking about tomorrow, not just today.
Well, they do. And I mean, I think that, look, I mean, who knows where tomorrow is, right? But you've obviously got this massive, this pandemic crisis has meant that business has just been completely thrown up in the air. What we do know is the hostiles, the unfriendlies out there have increased their attacks like you've never seen. So anybody who's actually trying to deny they're being attacked is with their head in the sand. What we also are hearing coming back from the street is this, that I think there's probably a very large number of companies that have been attacked, possibly been breached. The media aren't picking up on that necessarily because they've got plenty of other things they can talk about at this moment in time. And so why talk about cybersecurity, which for many companies, given their, the financial markets out there and what have you, is probably a blessing in disguise, definitely a blessing in disguise. And I think that, companies at this moment in time are really, they're sort of falling into two veins. And I think that there's those that, particularly the tier ones, have probably got pretty much of this covered. They made the right investments. They've got the teams. They've got the money. They've got the resources. They actually should be. They're getting attacked heavily, but they've got the ability to contain it. My biggest concern is these tier twos, tier threes, Dean, because they've sort of known cybersecurity is out there. They don't necessarily understand what cybersecurity really means. They sort of do, who does that in our company? Well, it's a technology thing, isn't it? Well, cybersecurity is not a technology thing. It's about risk management, first of all. So they hand the responsibility to the CIO. The CIO takes the responsibility, brings in somebody that they believe is a CISO or an information security expert. Maybe that person wasn't as good as what they were saying they were. You've got a situation at the moment, these tier twos, tier threes, where guess what, guys? You stand to have as much penalty against you for data breach and loss of data as the big guys do. And if you aren't spending money and finding out in your company, has that taken place? Or what have we got? What do we need to invest in? Or have we got the right people in here? All of these elementary areas, you could be really, really badly off. And with the deployment of people, obviously to home working, etc., this creates an even bigger security risk. I mean, I hear this all the time. Where's the crisis management plan? Where's the business continuity plans, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an absolute nightmare for them. And I think that what you've got to look at for tomorrow, as any business from that respect, is that you've got to be able to look at your company and realize that you need to have genuine assessment done. You need to understand where's your resilience, what level is your resilience at, and you need to take this seriously. And if you do not take this seriously, you're not protecting your board, you're not protecting your C-suite, you're not protecting your customers, you're going to get at some point caught out because, this is an invisible enemy. Dean, this is an invisible enemy out there. You don't know what's going on. In many cases, it's organized criminals that have got a ton of money to be able to spend there just bombarding companies' infrastructure, trying to find ways to be able to get in, leaving things out there, backdoors, et cetera, to come back, revisit later. So if you don't believe it's happening, you've got your head in the sand. It is happening. And I think that what you've got to do is you've got to embrace this correctly. You don't need to panic, right? But get some expertise. If you can't afford to invest in cybersecurity teams, then at least get one or two individuals that can come in and take a look for you and give you a view and opinion on what what is going on in your company's day, where the gaps are, and what you can do to improve that. Never going to be 100% safe in cybersecurity, never. Right? But you've got to understand, Dean, as a business, you've got to understand the risks. You've got to understand where your red flags are. What I like, I was talking to one of our advisors the other day, Dean, this is really important, right? Most people at the board level, most people at the C level, except for the CIO and the CISO, et cetera, probably don't understand cybersecurity technology and the detail behind it. What they do understand is dollars or pound signs, right? And the point being there is that get advisors to work with you that are not just telling you how to fix problems, but translating that risk into what it actually means if you have a breach that you're going to be impacted on in terms of your revenues. That business may not, or that business unit may not be able to do any more revenues for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. What's it going to do to your P&L? Right? What's it going to do to so many different things of your business, your valuation if you're publicly traded, or you know, how you contain that, et cetera, et cetera. Got to do this thing. You can't hide your head in sand. A crisis like we're in right now is the thing that it's actually illustrating is just what you haven't got.
Yeah. And I was thinking, as you were talking about boards and things like that, many of these companies have investors, right? So those investors are at huge risk. And I don't think there's enough conversation talking about the impact, because, you know, the minute that P&L shuts down for anything, whether it's COVID or it's a cyber attack, it's a whole different day. It's a whole different game. And that could be the final string on a lot of these companies that are, you know, on the edge or just hanging on or cutting it close, you know?
Yeah, the investors, I mean, you know, I talk to them. I talk to the PE firms. We work with that community because, you know, they need our help in terms of finding talent, et cetera, for them and doing advisory work as well. But, you know, when I'm talking to them, you know, they're on daily calls right now with their portfolio, you know, because they're looking at how do we continue the business, and more importantly, where the revenue is going to come from. Because you know as well as I do, Q2, Q3 are going to be disastrous in terms of figures for everybody, right? Nobody's selling anything properly out there except for the few companies that are able to trade off the mess that we're actually in. And so when you talk to those PE guys, they've got their eyes on what do we need to do to actually keep this business alive. But what you're also saying to them, well, it's not just what you got to do to keep them alive. Now you've got everybody deployed outside. It's keeping them secure as well. I mean, you know, you're trying to keep them going with the revenues. You may have to pump more money in, but if you're pumping more money into something which is then going to get breached and they're going to steal a whole bunch of data from you. Did you actually hear? I don't know if I can mention this on the podcast, but it was in the news. Did you actually hear about the Lady Gaga, Madonna, the legal firm that represents them got breached? You know, I mean, they're out there.
Their personal data is in there.
It's now on the dark web somewhere. Somebody's flogging that stuff out. I mean, you know, it's not to say, well, I told you it was going to happen. If you think it's not going to happen to you, there's a legal firm. It's not a big Sony. It's not a big, you know, a Disney or something like this, which are obviously under constant attack for many different reasons. It's a legal firm. But somebody is able to work out, but you know, well, they got some valuable data from high-end worth clients. Let's go after it. You know, what can I tell you? Any business is susceptible right now. You got to put your head out the sand, man. You don't need to spend fortunes of money either. You don't need to go and get a big consulting firm, a Deloitte, or Pricewaterhouse, or Accenture, or something like that. You're actually probably wasting money doing that. No disrespect to them; they're brilliant companies. So, you know, what I'm trying to explain there is the fact that you just need really good expert advice that's independent, that's impartial, it's not trying to flog you something, you know, oh, you got these problems, but guess what? I've got a tool here or a product there that's going to solve that problem for you. You know, get a person come in, do an assessment for you, and genuinely be able to put out there what you may or may not need and what you may or may not have to do to change. Straightforward, everybody should do it. It costs a few $1,000s. The other thing, Dean, we didn't touch on as well, but I think you sort of brought it about in a different way, is the other thing is that we're getting very, very strict on data privacy. And those laws haven't gone away. And just because we're in a pandemic doesn't mean to say that if your data gets breached, that you aren't still going to face fines. You are. As far as we're concerned, everybody we talk to who has knowledge about data and data privacy are saying, well, it's business as usual. They may delay fining, but they will fine. You know, so you got to be smart, man. You can't. You're very, very vulnerable at the moment, and that's not going to change for any time soon.
Well, and the crazy part is, I was just talking to some of my. I own part of another company based out of Palo Alto, so I stay in touch with that whole community. And we were talking this morning, and my friends at Google and Amazon and some of the other companies, Salesforce, are talking about that they're thinking about shutting down those campuses and actually keeping people working from home. And that's what I call a distributed threat. I don't even know if that's a legit term, but I'm like, what happens is, I'm sharing this bandwidth that we're on right now. Even though I have a business dedicated bandwidth in here, I'm sharing it with my neighbors, my kids, my neighbors' kids, and God knows who else. And that's a two-way street. Anytime you're plugged into the net, man, that's a two-way street. So now all of a sudden you're logging in, not just on your computer, but into your databases for the company. And those threats haven't even been solved yet. So I think people are going to be, even if you said you have to come back to work now, everything's open, I think people are going to want to maybe not come back to work when things open. So now you got this whole dynamic of the today problem, but now this is a big tomorrow problem too.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I mean, I read today that, the commercial landlords out there are seeing 20% drops in rent already. They're seeing people just vacate the offices, give up the leases. Twitter already announced that they're basically telling all of their employees, I think it was Twitter,
yep.
Saying that you can all work from home. You don't need to come back and work from the office, period. From now on, in other words, not just for 3 months, from now on, homework instead. We're going to see this, and we're going to see this change. And I'm excited about that change. I mean, I've been banging this drum for I don't know how long about the fact that, let's get some real serious broadband capability across the countries and start allowing people to get themselves out of high urban cost, high taxation areas and into areas where they can actually have a quality of life, with decent housing and money in their back pocket that's not just going out on high rents or high mortgage payments, because that's the only place you can live, because that's how you get to work. So I think there's some great things coming down the pathway.
Yeah.
But, to do that, we've got to see governments willing to support building that, technology infrastructure. We've got to see companies willing to support the fact that, yes, we're going to go this direction, but what does that mean from security? And what does that mean in adoption of digital transformation? I was talking to one of the advisors the other day, and he just said, well, what you're going to see tomorrow, simply put, is accelerated digital growth, because everybody's now realized, oh, well, this could become the new norm. We may have more of these lockdowns, certainly until we've got a vaccine. We're going to have on, off anyway. I think we all agree with that, right? So in which case, we've got to make sure that businesses, or the business has to make sure that it's embracing digital transformation. And if you embrace digital transformation, you've got to embrace security, cyber security, because it's the same thing. You can't have one without the other, because you're leaving yourself vulnerable. So the great thing is that out of this chaos, yes, we're going to have a change, but we'll adapt. We've always done that, for goodness sake. That's not going to be the problem. But the problem is that you've got to do it in a way that the areas that you don't understand, you don't know what you don't know. The areas that you don't understand, for goodness sake, don't sit there and think, I don't really understand that, so I won't inquire about it. I won't push. I won't go and find out. Go and find out. Because this could be the big difference between your business thriving or you closing up shop. Simple as that. Once a tier 2 or tier 3 business, particularly tier 3, you get a breach and you start facing some of the fines that are out there that you could ultimately end up facing, you can be out of business literally overnight. You can be closed up and it's all gone. And it was just because you didn't do something sensible and spend a few $1,000s. Silly, really silly thing.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, man. Well, this is exactly what I wanted to get out of this. I think people need to hear this. I think they need to have a wake-up call. And then I know you guys do a lot of advisory services. I was sort of impressed because, with the consulting background, when I saw advisory and consulting, I saw everything from risk assessments to policy review. And I come from a compliance background, so I smiled when I saw compliance on the list, because that's a big deal. I come from Merrill Lynch and banking and all that stuff. And it's like, man, you got to have that in place. And then, of course, we need the right people. You couldn't have said it better. You need the right people, whether it's, if you can't afford them inside, you need to have them come in from the outside, but get a good team going so that the company is in a good position not to shut down or get shut down.
Yeah. Yeah, Dean, I think you're to the point. If you put it into just simple steps. First of all, wake up to the fact that go out, get an assessment, bring an independent. You must go independent because that way you're getting a thought and information put back to you without an agenda behind it to turn you into a ongoing annuity paying customer, which is what the big consulting firms are all about. So go get independent advice, telling you, doing an assessment, telling you where you are at this moment in time. Even if you got it done 6 months ago, 12 months ago, it's changed. You've got to do it again, right? Look at the people within that assessment. It's not to say, oh my goodness me, I haven't got the right team. It's to say, have you got the right people in the right place? And then look at the reporting structure. How does cybersecurity work today when it's reporting into, say, for example, the CIO or the CTO, which is invariably a lot of companies have that way? That's a conflict of interest. Why is that a conflict of interest? Well, the conflict of interest is the CIO, CTO want to do things with technology, want to spend money in technology, building it themselves or bringing in various different tools from elsewhere as they race into the sort of digital transformation era. And they may not want to hear what the security experts are telling them about the vulnerability that investment can make, or what that investment needs to also be backed up with in terms of security investment to say, yeah, we can do that, but we've got to spend money in this area of security to ensure that as we do that, we're not leaving ourselves vulnerable. So I need some more budget. They don't want to hear that. So the companies really need to, I much prefer to see a CISO, and the CISOs prefer it, of course, themselves, going into a CEO. But if that's not going to be the case, get the CISO into the CFO or into the chief legal officer if you happen to have one. Try not to get them into the CIO. They need to be working hand in hand. They need to be supporting each other. They don't need to have one working for the other, because it will cause problems and leave yourself still vulnerable if you're not careful, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. 28 advisors on my group today, and plenty out there that we're in network and contact with. I find very few, if anybody, that I've asked the same question to that have told me, no, you're wrong. It's perfectly okay to go into the CIO. They all say we want the independence. We want to be able to state our opinion without feeling that, well, I don't want to say something because Bob's my or Sheila's my boss, and the last thing I want to do is contradict them. Do you see what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely. So that's awesome. So you've got an amazing advisory team. You have assembled with an amazing network, as you talked about, which our audience knows all too well, because we've talked about it for decades. So if somebody wants, what's the best way that if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where would you want them to go? How would they get a hold of you?
Oh, great question. I mean, obviously we have our website up and running, and that's easy to find, dttransformation.com, D for David, T for Tommy, transformation.com. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. The company's on LinkedIn. Alistair Wells, you're on LinkedIn. You can find me through there, and that's got all my contact details. Got my phone number, got my email address, and I think, like yourself, Dean, running our own businesses, we tend to be 24/7. So I never look at it and think any time is a bad time to call or reach out. And I think in terms, and then also there's team members. One of the things we didn't touch on, which I think is a really important point here. I've got a gentleman called Matt Decker. He's one of your neighbors, I believe. Yep. Yeah, Illinois boy. Matt's running our interim practice. Now, this is really exciting, Dean. This is what companies need to grab hold of as well, particularly if they look at DTT, is that actually going out today and spending money on building big teams and hiring permanent may not be very cost effective, or you may actually not be required until you understand what your strategy is going to be in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months in terms of digital transformation, embrace, etc. So instead of doing that, you may want to look at interim. I definitely know certain countries where, say, for example, the UK, if you employ somebody in the UK, if you let them go, it's 4 weeks salary as a minimum, holiday pay, all these bits and pieces they have to pay. It's expensive. So, I think that companies need to be smart. You need to get access to specialist skill. You can buy that in on an hourly basis, a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, just while we get ourselves through the next few months. And then build that strategy up, but don't do nothing. That's the most important thing.
No, amen, brother. And I'm so glad that on this planet, we have the opportunity to connect and meet with so many people, and I'm so glad we got to connect and meet over the last year. And I've learned so much from you and from your advisory team. And I love Matt Decker. I knew him before he came on board, so I'm a big fan.
Everybody loves Matt. Everybody loves Matt. It's easy for me. Yeah, he's a great guy, Dean. You know, he's a great guy, and I can't wait to we finally be able to go and have a social distance beer together. You know, that would be nice. Me, you, and Matt. Right?
or a bourbon or a scotch, maybe.
Yeah, he's a big bourbon guy. You're right about that.
Yes, he is. So am I. So am I. That's how we met.
You are?
Yeah, that's how we met.
Ah, now the truth comes out. You see, I get it. I get it, man. Yes, there you are. Yeah, great.
Right.
This has been brilliant.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it, and we'll put Alistair's contact information and his company information in the show notes. And I encourage you to at least have a conversation with them. So if this is something that you're talking, and I think he made a key point here, that this is not an IT problem. This is a business problem. And it needs to be treated as a business problem. So make sure you get people in the conversation that control the money, the operations, and actually control the company. So, and affect the growth of the company. So all hands on deck. Let's be in this together. Let's help each other out. And please contact Alistair and his team at DTT Transformation so that they can help you get to that next level. Alistair, thanks again. And I know you and I are talking super quick, so we'll talk soon.
Indeed. It's a pleasure, Dean. Thanks for this, and pass my best on to everybody. And let's catch up soon, my friend. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
You got it, man. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.